When we were joining two tables together in the previous video, we came up with this code. This code takes the details from both the salary range and the staff tables, compares the salary against the low salary and the high salary from the salary table, and then tells us what grade the member of staff is. Now this is starting to become quite a complex query. There's quite a lot of things that's happening here. And so rather than trying to work out exactly what's going on here line by line, we could use the explain command. Now when we run this query, we're going to get a different type of output. This is going to give us a list of all of the different actions that are taking place within the query. So you can see here that we've got a simple selection from the salary range table, with 5 rows being returned to us. We also have a simple query from the staff table. In this case we're returning 15 rows to us. And you can see here that we have all of this extra information. We could also use the describe keyword here. This will give us the exact same output. The explain and the describe keywords are identical as far as SQL is concerned. If you're using the commands in the real world, you will tend to see describe being used when you want to see information about tables. So when we looked at what's within a specific table earlier, we can describe the staff table and it will give us information about the staff table. In the real world, you will also tend to see explain being used to actually explain queries like we have just done now. But the important thing to remember is that the two words are identical as far as SQL is concerned. So worrying about which words to use in specific scenarios isn't really a big issue. An interesting point to note is that you can put either the words explain or describe in front of any MySQL query whatsoever, and it will give you a breakdown of the steps that SQL is actually going through, which may help you understand what's actually happening within the query. If you're using MySQL Workbench, you may note that we've got this execution plan down at the bottom right here. If we remove the word explain from this query and instead go to the execution plan, this will give us a different visualization of that query. Now all of the information in here is the exact same information that you would see in explain or describe, but it's displayed in a much more user-friendly and understandable way. If you hover over each of the different elements, it will give you more information about them. So in this case you can see that we've got these two queries, the select range from the salary range, and you've got the select from the staff table. These are then processed through a block nested loop. They're ordered because we've ordered them here, and then we are given the output. If we did this exact same thing for just a normal select statement, and go to the execution plan again, you can see that we've got this actual gathering of the data and then the display of the data, and that's exactly what you would expect. Now when we were looking at joins in an earlier video, we used this code to actually find the minimum and maximum salary range for each member of staff. And this is where the execution plan and the explain and describe commands really come into their own. Because we have these nested statements, we don't necessarily know which order they're going to be processed at the start when we've typed this information. If we go to the execution plan, however, we can see that we're going to select 4 statements, which are these 4 selects. And we also have one final select here, which is this one. So in essence, we have 5 select statements within this code. And we could, for example, just explain this using the other way, using the actual text command. And you can see that we have these 5 output statements, which corresponds to the execution plan here. Remember that you need to remove the word explain if you want to use the execution plan, so that MySQL Workbench can actually process it correctly. If you were using this code in a production environment, you may be interested in trying to optimize it. And this is where the execution plan in particular really comes into its own, because you can see from this that we have 5 separate select statements. And you can also see that a lot of the data is duplicated. We're doing basically the exact same command for each individual table. And as I say, if you're using this in a production environment, you may not want to do 5 separate select statements. You may want to select one set of data and push that out to PHP or whatever processing environment that you're using, and manipulate the data from in there, which would reduce the overheads from MySQL considerably. It's also important to remember that there are many different ways to write the same statement within SQL, and so it's entirely possible that you could rewrite this entire query within SQL to just use one single select statement and then manipulate the data from there. But the entire point of the execution plan and the explain and describe commands is the fact that they give you the access to understand how the actual query is being processed, not just the fact that it is being processed and not just the results of the query. And that does open a world of opportunity in terms of optimizations which you can then perform on your code.